I want to talk about Kevin Durant because the Brooklyn Nets were eliminated from the NBA playoffs when they lost to the Milwaukee Bucks in a 7-game series. And I don't know if surprise is not the right word here, because Kevin Durant is widely hated by many, many people. And after losing Game 7, I saw a ton of people dogging on Kevin Durant and saying, I think blaming Kevin Durant for losing the series. And I just think that's very, very wrong and just a poor analysis of what happened. I am not the biggest Kevin Durant fan, at all. I've been very critical of him in the past, and the way he handles himself on Twitter has often been embarrassing. But I watched the Nets all through the playoffs, and they beat Boston in round 1. They ended up losing to Milwaukee in 7 games. And I became convinced that if it wasn't for bad luck, the Brooklyn Nets would likely have won the NBA title. I mean, they were, I think, the best team out there. A healthy Brooklyn team against Phoenix would be an amazing, amazing NBA Finals. I wish you could have seen that. I feel like we kind of got robbed of that actually happening. And, in Game 1 of the Nets-Bucks series, literally 23 seconds into the game, James Harden hurt his hamstring. So James Harden missed basically all of Game 1, and then all of Game 2, all of Game 3, all of Game 4. And then in Game 4, Kyrie Irving, landed really badly and hurt his ankle. And so I guess in Game 5, James Harden did come back, but he was a shell of himself. He was playing hurt. He could barely move. Literally the only thing James Harden could do when he came back for Games 5, 6, and 7 was like a step back 3. I mean, he scored 5 points in Game 5 when he came back. So he was mostly a decoy. And for large parts of this series, there was no James Harden, mostly no Kyrie Irving. And on top of that, the Nets' three-point shooter, Joe Harris, really, really struggled shooting the ball throughout this entire series. He led the NBA in three-point percentage during the regular season. And then in this series, he just fell apart. In Game 3, Joe Harris was 1 for 7 from beyond the arc. And then Game 5, he was also 1 for 7 shooting three-pointers. Game 6, he was 1 for 4. Joe Harris's shooting percentage just plummeted. So you have injuries. You have Joe Harris not doing anything really to help your team. And so for large parts of this series, Kevin Durant was alone against Giannis and Drew Holiday playing well and Chris Middleton and PJ Tucker and Brook Lopez. And, Giannis is a 2-time MVP, let alone all the help that he had. And so I just can't put this series loss on Kevin Durant. That's just not right. I mean, in Game 5, Kevin Durant played all 48 minutes of the game, had 49 points, 17 rebounds, 10 assists. Again, and I repeat, no rest. So he's playing the entire game, putting it all out on the line, winning Game 5, making it happen. And again, James Harden had 5 points in Game 5 on 46 minutes playing in the game. He was hurt. James Harden wasn't himself. And Game 7 went to overtime. Again, Kevin Durant had no rest. He played all 53 minutes. James Harden had a better impact. He was a little better. He also played 53 minutes. But when you look at Kevin Durant played 48 minutes, of the whole game, because that's how long an NBA game is, plus 5 minutes of overtime, no rest, and basically no help, putting up 48 points in Game 7. And James Harden tried, but he was immobile. There was very little he could do. When you look at the context of how Brooklyn lost to Milwaukee, I do not know how you can put that loss on Kevin Durant. That's incredibly wrong. It feels honestly cruel. It feels like you must have a clear and obvious agenda to just hate on Kevin Durant. If you really say Kevin Durant should have done more in that series, sorry, you're wrong. You're just dead wrong. I've never really liked Kevin Durant. I am the last person. I thought I would never be the guy defending him. But I walked away from this series really respecting him. Kevin Durant carried the Nets to Game 7. And people were saying, he didn't deliver in Game 7. I'm like, he was the reason they had a Game 7. Kevin Durant was unbelievable in this series. By the way, go watch the shot KD hit at the end of regulation in Game 7 to send the game to overtime. Literally if Kevin Durant's foot wasn't so big, that's a three-pointer because his foot was on the three-point line. He hits this long turnaround jumper. Ridiculous shot to send the game into overtime for 2. And, go watch it. To hit that shot in that moment and then be critical of that guy who did that, I don't know how any sane human being watches that series. It must be the people criticizing Kevin Durant are just people who didn't watch and were critical. Like they look for any opportunity they can to pile on to Kevin Durant. I get it. He joined the Warriors. I get it. He ruined the NBA for a couple of years. But even me, a guy who doesn't really like Kevin Durant, could acknowledge that was amazing. The way he carried the Nets to Game 7 with not really much help and playing entire games with no rest. Between games 5 and 6, he played 5 straight quarters in a row of basketball. That's unbelievable. Kevin Durant did everything he could. He left it all on the court. I certainly cannot blame Kevin Durant for the Nets losing to the Milwaukee Bucks. In fact, I walked away from the Nets season feeling really hopeful, optimistic. Because when the Nets first put together their big three, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant, I went, we'll see if that works because they're all different personalities and maybe the personalities won't work well together. And they had Steve Nash hired as their head coach. And I was like, well, Steve Nash, loved watching him play. He's never coached in the NBA before, and I was worried about that. And, Steve Nash, trying to talk. English is hard. It's hard to talk. Steve Nash was clearly the right coach for them, where he's a guy who, he's a former NBA superstar. He can relate to them. He worked well with them. And if James Harden and Kyrie Irving had not gotten hurt, right now, this moment, we'd be watching the Eastern Conference Finals tonight, Game 1, and the Nets would be the favorite to win the title. Phoenix is phenomenal. Phoenix is really good to watch. They play really well together. But a healthy Brooklyn against Phoenix would be the favorite. I don't know how you wouldn't feel that way. The Nets, what I saw was bad luck. They lost because they got injured. And you can argue, well, conditioning and not play, whatever you want to argue. But I am really excited for next year. If Brooklyn can stay healthy, their future is bright. I watched them in the playoffs and they changed my mind. I'm a believer. I think I even put out a video saying this will never win a title. This will never work. Nah, I think I'm wrong. I really, the Nets changed my mind. I think they are a team that if they can stay healthy next year, that seems like a title contender. Seems like a team that wins the title. I do have 2 other takeaways from this series. I hate Giannis' really long. Giannis has this really long, free throw ritual that just takes forever. And he does this 10 times, and it's like, dude, you get 10 seconds at the free throw line, and they almost never call it. It's so irritating. They count, and they rarely call a 10-second violation, and it seems very how is this? They called it twice in the playoffs. How is this a violation to all the other times he does it aren't? It's are we going to call it consistently or not? So I hate Giannis's free throw ritual. It's just terrible and annoying. And then I guess number 2, I'm going to really miss having a New York crowd in the NBA playoffs. There's something about New York. Crowds in New York are special, especially in the playoffs, basketball. There's a energy, and I would even I jokingly call it mean. They're mean, F you, Trey. That's the Knicks, but the Knicks got eliminated. I'm like, okay, Brooklyn is our last hope to keep a New York crowd in the NBA playoffs, and then they got eliminated too. And it's like, oh man, I was so sad. Other than the fact that I love watching Kevin Durant do incredible stuff with the basketball, I was like, man, it's also sad that we're no longer going to have a New York crowd in the NBA playoffs anymore. I really enjoyed watching that. And I can't say it enough. Kevin Durant should not be the person blamed. And I'm really excited about the Nets' future. They got unlucky injuries. To put that on Kevin Durant is just wrong to me. It's mean spirited and hateful. And if you look at it objectively and you watched the series, there's no way your takeaway can be Kevin Durant's the reason why the Nets didn't beat Milwaukee in that series. Like, are you on drugs? Like, how is that your takeaway? It's clearly you're not paying attention or you're a hater.